A couple years ago during COVID, wow, it's really loud. Thanks, Dev. There was all kinds of theories of what medication to take during COVID. You guys remember that? It wasn't too long ago. That one theory was ivermectin. You guys remember that one? It was the top medication to take, and it was all the talk. Many were saying that it worked. The government said, no, you need to take the jab. The pursuit for a cure for the infection was the goal without taking the jab. According to conspiracy theories, the jab was the bad thing, right? You guys remember that? What would you do if you knew the cure and you would be put in jail and told not to talk about it by the government because you might lose out on some benefits? It's kind of the same thing with these Sadducees, right? They didn't want to hear anything about Jesus, even though they saw all the miracles that were going on. Okay? We'll look at two groups today: Peter, John, and the crowd, and Sadducees and the council. Before we see these two groups, let's see what's going on here in chapter 4. Peter and John are before the council in the temple, preaching Christ and telling them what was prophesied and what came to true, right? Back in Acts 22, verse 22. Men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus, the Nazarene, a man attested to you by God with miracles and wonders and signs, which God performed through him in your midst. Just as you yourselves know, this man delivered over by the predetermined plan and foreknowledge of God. You nailed him to the cross by the hands of godless men and put him to death. Verse 36, chapter 2, therefore let all house of Israel know for certain that God has made him both Lord and Christ, this Jesus who you crucified. Okay, so this is what Peter and John are preaching to the crowd and to this council. These Sadducees, are top dogs at Jerusalem for preaching. They were sitting there. John and Peter were defending the gospel, healing a man who's crippled, and people were astonished. And think about Peter and John before the council here. Imagine everybody was here before Congress. So you're there before Congress and you're preaching Christ. Kind of nerve-wracking, right? Same thing, right? Same concept. So a couple things I want to point out in Peter and John. Who were Peter and John before Christ? Who were they? Fishermen. Straight up fishermen. Okay? And what was going on in Peter during his time with Christ? Same thing with John. Was Peter perfect? Unqualified. Denied him 3 times, right? What happened to John? Anybody remember what John? Wanted to call fire down from heaven on the Samaritans, right? They all struggled and dealt with self and sin. Okay? But Peter and John were willing to leave all and follow Christ. Leave everything behind and follow Christ. And God used them in great ways. As Peter preached, people were amazed at his boldness because he was unschooled. Right? Turn over to Acts 4:13. Now they all observed the confidence of Peter and John and understood that they were uneducated, untrained men. They were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. Okay? So what makes a good witness for Christ? What do you think? What makes a good witness for Christ? I like that. And I had this kind of the same thing, it's a change of heart and no longer chasing after the world's good. Contentment is tough. Contentment's hard to get. Understanding that this world is passing away and everything at you, TV, magazines, billboards, is shoving it down your throat. Have this, get this, right? And contentment even in our trials and tribulations. We want to pray it away, do whatever we can in our own strength to get rid of this trial or tribulation, right? So what makes a good witness, I would say, is definitely a zeal for truth. Must also be balanced for a love of people. Why do you think that? As Sally said, yes, there's a zeal for truth, and it always must be balanced for a love of people. Without it, zeal can turn into harshness, legalism, judgmentalism. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds good. Okay. Zeal for truth, confidence and boldness. We kind of talked about that, right? Confidence and boldness. Untempered by compassion and grace, can quickly turn to pride and smugness. Same concept, right? You got too bold, kind of like you want to smack them over the head with the Bible, right? Must have compassion and grace. Sometimes we forget where we were even at one time in our lives, right? Trying to think of that holier than thou, kind of just, you needed this, you needed that. Confidence is a wonderful virtue, but without humility, it becomes self-confidence, which can lead to boasting and an attitude of exclusiveness. Agree? When that happens, our witness of the grace of God is tainted, and others see us exactly the kind of person they wish not to be. Our demeanor should be one that reflects a passion for truth. Okay? A compassion for people and a steadfast desire to serve and represent our Lord by reflecting His humility and grace. Does that make sense? I'm going to repeat that. Our demeanor should be one that reflects a passion for truth, compassion for people, and a steadfast desire to serve and represent our Lord by reflecting His humility and grace. Good, we're talking about witnessing, okay? The other group, Sadducees and elders, were consumed with status and a zeal for the here and now, according to what Pastor Doug said last Sunday, right? Here and now. They believed in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, didn't believe in life after death, temporal interests. Where's your hope? Yeah, it goes down to the here and now. They don't want to mess up the status quo. Okay? They were consumed with what the Romans wanted. They didn't care about anything else. As long as the status quo and the Romans were happy. They were also appointed by the Roman government as well. Okay, money and power will blind you from seeing what's truly important. Okay, money and power will blind you from seeing what's important. And that's what's going on with the Pharisees, Sadducees. Okay? Turn over to John 12. We've got a couple minutes here. This is what is crazy to me. And Pastor Doug pointed this out. John 12:9. The large crowd of the Jews then learned that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake, but they might also see Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. But the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews were going away and were believing in Jesus. Man, what would you guys do? If you saw somebody being raised from the dead, what would you do? That's crazy. And then to see a 40-year-old man who's crippled for life to walk? You would think after seeing a dead man come back to life and a crippled man walk, they would have a change of heart, right? Okay? I'm going to give you 3 reasons of why these Sadducees did not have a change of heart. 1, fear. fear of an insurrection that would cause the Romans to step in. Those who were in positions of power and authority, as the Pharisees and Sadducees were, feared losing their power and authority. The Jewish leaders feared the consequences of a revolt against Rome. Okay? Number 2, exposure. Jesus and the apostles showed the people who the Pharisees actually were. Self-righteous and did everything for gain rather than glorifying God. Matthew 23. When Jesus walked this earth, true righteousness and holiness was manifested by him before the eyes of the people. It didn't take exceptional brilliance to discern the difference between the real and the counterfeit. So the Pharisees were exposed because they were exposed, and because they were exposed by the true and authentic holiness of Christ, they hated him and they couldn't wait to get rid of him. Number 3, jealousy. Everywhere Jesus went, he attracted many crowds of people. He was popular among the people, whereas the leaders of the Jews would lay heavy burdens on them and be judgmental. They saw Jesus associating with common people and saw them cheering him, loving him, and they couldn't stand it because they were envious and suspicious of his popularity. As I come to a close, I ask this question. Which group do you fall in? Are you more concerned with your status, fear of losing friends, and focusing on the here and now? Or are you concerned with the kingdom of heaven, boldly preaching Christ and being an example of Christ and a passion for truth?